Well, it's Friday, July 14th. I thought I'd start off this vid for tonight when we continue our explorations of the NGC, galaxy clusters, nebulae, etc., etc. And I'd give you a little bit of a tour. This is the telescope, of course, and I mount the camera right here so we can look at the screen right there. A couple things I have to do is remove a lens cap, and I have to remove lens caps from the finder scope. I have to spend a little time making sure the alignments are okay, both mechanically and digitally. But what I really want to share with you is this fantastic sky. And for the last 3 nights, right about there, I've been seeing the Cygnus Rift, which means the skies are pretty deep, optimally deep, at least 5.5 magnitude deep, which is one of the reasons why I've been able to image faint nebulosity associated with 15th magnitude galaxies over the last night. So there's a quick look of the situation, and I'll be coming back out around 9:30, 9:45 in order to do my alignments, and then we will proceed with the NGC series. I believe it starts this evening at 6650. Welcome to July 14th at 10:10 in the evening. We're going to proceed with the next roughly 30 accessible studies of the 50 that'll go from in the NGC catalog. They proceed from 6650 to 6699. As it turned out, NGC 6650 and 51 were both galaxies in Draco. And as it turns out, NGC 6652, a globular cluster in Sagittarius, magnitude 8.5, 3.5 arc minutes with stars of magnitude 13.3, a class 6 at 31,000 light years on the far side of our galaxy, is minus almost 33 degrees, and apparently it's being blocked by the apple tree to the south and east. So we're going to come back and look at that one a little bit later. As it turns out, NGC 6656 is a globular cluster in Sagittarius, and guess what? It's also Messier 52. Magnitude 5.2, 24 arc minutes in size, 10 brightest stars are 10.7 magnitude. It's a class 7, 10,000 light years distant, almost minus 24 degrees in declination. And it really is spilling all over the screen, isn't it? NGC 6657 is a galaxy in Lyra, magnitude 14, smallish. 0.7 by 0.4 arc minutes, which means it's presenting oblately. It's a spiral with a large bar, small core, 314 million light years distant. If it were about 1 arc minute in size, it would roughly be at that distance close to Messier 32 in diameter, but it is not. It's at plus 34 degrees declination. NGC 6658 is a galaxy in Hercules, magnitude 12.9, 1.6 by 0.3 arc minutes. This is an Eggianer spiral, lowercase a, 196 million light years distant, probably about the size of our own Milky Way galaxy. It's at plus 23 degrees roughly north declination. Pretty rich star field there too, isn't there? Further north. Well, a little hop without a skip and a jump from NGC 6658, the galaxy we just looked at, is an open cluster in Hercules, NGC 6659, some 7 arc minutes in diameter, 3,800 light years distant. It's roughly plus 23.5 degrees declination, so in a nice dark part of the sky. NGC 6660 is a galaxy in Hercules. It's also NGC 6661. It's magnitude 12.1, 1.8 by 1.1 arc minutes oblate presentation, a spiral of lowercase a, 196 million light years distant, and it's 22, almost 23 degrees north declination. So in great sky position for getting a decent image. NGC 6662 is a galaxy in Lyra, magnitude 13.7. This one's pretty edge-on, 1.6 by 0.5 arc minutes, so it's between oblate and edge-on. It's a class S spiral with a large bar and a lowercase ab, 247 million light years distant, plus 32 degrees. So we're heading up a little bit closer to the zenith now. NGC 6663 is a galaxy in Lyra once again, magnitude 13.9, pretty face-on, 1 by 0.9 arc minutes, some 300 million light years distant. Had it been another 50 or 60 million light years out there, it would have been the size of Messier 31, the Andromeda Galaxy, which is 152,000 light years in diameter. We're at plus 40 degrees declination at this point. Here we have NGC 66664, open cluster in Scutum, the shield, magnitude 7.8, 16 arc minutes in size, 50 stars, the brightest are magnitude 10.1. It's a rather loose class 3 cluster with a moderate amount of distribution of stellar brightnesses, class 2, 3,800 light years distant, minus 8 degrees from the celestial equator. Here we have NGC 6665, another galaxy in Lyra, fainter, magnitude 14.5, kind of oblately presented at 1.1 by 0.6 arc minutes. It's a spiral with a lowercase c, 224 million light years distance. I'd venture to say it's about the size of our own Milky Way galaxy. It's almost plus 31 degrees declination. NGC 6669 is a galaxy in Hercules. We just skipped over a few of them. This is a relatively faint one, magnitude 15.7, nearly 1 by 1 arc minute, so a face-on. It's a spiral with a large bar. It's also got a number of other attributes. It's got irregularities associated with it. CIRR, so it's an irregular. 183 million light years distant. This one should be not much more than a starry looking point, roundish with vague sense of nebulosity around the rim because it's pretty much a face-on. It's at plus 22 degrees, 4 minutes, 35 seconds north declination. We had to skip a couple of galaxies in Draco because they were too far north. NGC 6671 is a galaxy in Lyra. It's magnitude 14, 1.5 by 1.3 arc minutes spiral, so it's pretty much face-on, 150 million light years distant. We're not going to see much more than the core of this baby. Plus 26 degrees declination. Might look for a little bit of fuzziness around that core, however. NGC 6672 is a galaxy in Lyra, magnitude 15, very small, 0.3 by 0.2 arc minutes, which basically means something around 18 by 12 arc seconds. It's very compact, very distant, 409 million light years, and it's about as far north as I can go, although it's not quite hit the zenith yet. There may be some blockage of the aperture of the 6-inch scope. It's at 42, almost 43 degrees northern declination. Fortunately, it's not quite culminating, otherwise we wouldn't get anything at all. Wow, this is about the largest galaxy we've seen in quite a while. NGC 6674 is a galaxy in Hercules. Magnitude 12.2, 4.2 by 2.1 arc minutes, so it's basically an oblate presentation. It's a spiral galaxy with a large bar and a lower subset of B. 157 million light years distant. This one's rather large. I would assume it's about 200 to 250,000 light years in diameter. It's at plus 25 degrees, so it's in a good sky condition position. And you would expect, because of its magnitude of 12.2 and being a rather oblate 2-to-1 aspect ratio, that we're probably seeing 15th magnitude extensions going off in all directions around this galaxy. Enjoy. And we're about to turn the corner on our second half of studies for the evening. This is NGC 6675, galaxy in Lyra, brightish at magnitude 12.4. largest at 1.1 by 1.8 by 1.3 arc minutes, so somewhat between an oblate and a face-on. It's a spiral of class B, lowercase bc, 114 million light years distant. Presumably somewhat, I would call it a super dwarf, probably somewhere around 75,000 light years in diameter. It's at 40 degrees. Plus declination, and I think we got the full aperture of the scope on it. We just skipped over about 3 or 4 galaxies in Draco. This is NGC 6680, galaxy in Hercules. One of my favorite kind of galaxies, magnitude 15.5. It's at 0.7 by 0.5 arc minutes. It's a spiral, 192 million light years distant. And it's at plus 22 degrees. The reason I say it's one of my favorite is because it's about as faint a galaxy as you can get, where you can actually see some kind of bleeding out of an aura or to the directions around the central core. Look for that. What we're seeing here is a globular cluster in Sagittarius, pretty deep south at minus 32 degrees. It's NGC 6681, but you may know it as Messier 70. Its magnitude 7.8 arc minutes in size. The brightest stars are magnitude 14. It's a class 5, so towards the more compact area of the 1 to 12 scale. 28,000 light years distant, which pushes it past the core of the galaxy. And as I mentioned, minus 32 degrees, which is pretty far south. The field looks pretty good. The stars are nice and round. And you can see a slight aura around the core of the galaxy. I'm sorry, around the core of the globular cluster. You may have noticed that NGC 6681, the globular cluster, was in the center of the field. I did resynchronize there because I had everything centered up, and then when I flipped the lid of the camera handycam open, it disturbed the alignment. So that's why everything was shifted off to the right on the screen. What you're seeing here is NGC 6682, an open cluster in Scutum. There isn't much information about it other than that it's 18 arc minutes in size. It's at almost minus 5 degrees, declination. And there are stars all over the screen. At 18 arc minutes, yeah, that would pretty much fill it, but we have no sense of there being a frontier to this open cluster. Not too far from NGC 6682 is 6683, another open cluster in Scutum. Its magnitude is 9.4, 11 arc minutes in size, a mere 20 stars, the brightest of which are magnitude 11.7. It's a fairly condensed class Roman numeral 1 cluster, but however it's got a moderate distribution of stellar magnitudes, 3,900 light years distance and minus 6 degrees declination. Wow, that field is filled with stars. We're now looking at a galaxy in Lyra, NGC 6685. Its magnitude 13.4. It's 1.1 by 0.9 arc minutes, and it's a spiral of the lenticular class O, 300 million light years distant. So it's a little smaller than M31, but still in the 110 to 120,000 light years range. It's at plus 40 degrees, and I do not believe we are getting any obstruction of the aperture of the scope, so we should be getting a pretty decent view. One thing about it is, because it's almost 1 arc minute in size, you could say its average surface brightness is magnitude 13.4. And by my experience, depending upon the type of the galaxy, you have to have a scope that will at least give you another 1 magnitude reach beyond that to begin to see any kind of detail other than actually detecting it. Or you can avert your vision on a scope like a 6-inch, which can see 13.5 magnitude stars under reasonable conditions, and you can see more and even more detail as possible under eye movement. But we don't have to worry about any of this because we have real-time CCD imaging and display on the screen. Only a couple of clicks of the stepper motors from NGC 6685 is a Galaxy 6686 in Lyra. Magnitude 15, almost 1 arc minute, 0.9 by 0.8 arc minutes in size. A compact, 316 million light years distant. Had it been closer to 360, it would have been about the size of Messier 31, the Great Andromeda Galaxy. This is at plus 40 degrees. I'm not getting a sense we're getting any obstruction of the aperture, however, of the scope. Short hop from NGC 6686 Galaxy, and an avoidance of Draco brings us to 6688, a galaxy in Lyra. Fairly bright, magnitude 12.6, 1.7 by 1.7, a spiral of lowercase a, 255 million light years distant. This one's pretty close to being an Andromeda 150,000 light year diameter galaxy. Given its magnitude of 12.6 and its face-on status, we should be able to see all kinds of detail by adding, because the scope should be able to see some kind of nebulosity down to magnitude 17. So there should be some nice extensions to this galaxy on the screen. We're at 36 degrees north declination. Having skipped over, I believe it was 3 draconian galaxies, we're now at NGC 6692, another galaxy in Lyra, faintish, magnitude 14.5, somewhat oblate in presentation, 1 by 0.7 arc minutes. It's a spiral of the lenticular class O, 252 million light years distant, probably something about the size of our own Milky Way galaxy at about 100,000 light years across. We are at declination, almost plus 35. After a couple of draconian galaxy skips, we ended up in NGC 6694, an open cluster in Scutum, which is also known as Messier 26. Magnitude 8, 15 arc minutes in size, some 30 stars, the brightest of which are magnitude 10.3. It's a class 1-1, which basically means compact, and many of its stars share roughly the same magnitude. 5,200 light years distant, minus 9 degrees declination. And that field is filled with stars, but the cluster is quite apparent. NGC 6695 is a galaxy in Lyra, magnitude 13.5, 1.1 by 0.7 arc minutes. It's a spiral with a large bar, class B, 251 million light years at plus 40 degrees. And For some reason I'm thinking I may have shown you something like this earlier, but I'll have to look at it on the manana. Getting close to the end, folks. NGC 6697 is a galaxy in Hercules, magnitude 12.7, 1.2 by 1 arc minute. It is an elliptical, which means you won't be seeing much more than the bright core plus some maybe a little fuzziness around the complete circumference of the galaxy. 215 million light years distant, plus 25.5 degrees in declination. See if we've got some more between 98 99. Now what you're seeing here is typical of a deep south study. Stars aren't pinpointy, they start off all having a ring around them. Watch it slowly come together. NGC 6698 is an open cluster in Sagittarius, 3,700 light years distant, and that's about all we know about it. It's at minus 25.5 degrees declination, but I do like the look of the field. I just couldn't tell you where there would be an open cluster in it. There must be some commonality among the stars, but there's really not much information other than its distance. So, maybe very wide. Maybe some of these stars are all somehow related to one another. We are, of course, now getting that view of globular cluster NGC 6652 in Sagittarius, magnitude 8.5, 3.5 arc minutes. Its brightest stars are magnitude 13.3. It's a class 6, so it's a middling cluster in terms of how condensed the stars are in it. 31,000 light years distant, definitely on the far side of the Milky Way galaxy, at minus almost 33 degrees declination. And I'm giving it a chance because it takes a while for studies that far south to integrate well on the screen, but looks like we are getting a decent view, although I suspect once again the globular cluster is probably 2 to 3 times larger than what's specified here, so probably somewhere in the 7 arc minute range. And I'll have to check that for data in the morning. I'm going to look ahead now, as I typically tend to do, to something in the 6700 series that we might find of interest for tomorrow, or whatever day we have another beautiful night sky like this one. Well, I found a very hopeful galaxy that I wanted to preview, very low, very quick in the scheme of 6700 series. I think it was 6703, but it was too far north at this point to get the full aperture of the scope on it. However, I think I've come across a really interesting globular cluster in Aquila, NGC 6749. This is a very faint globular cluster, magnitude 12.3 and large, 6.3 arc minutes. Its brightest stars are magnitude 16.5. It is 25,000 light years distant and about 2 degrees above the celestial equator. I am seeing this globular cluster on the screen. I am also seeing star components, which demonstrates that if the brightest stars in NGC 6749 are magnitude 16.5, that we are getting that plus, because they're fairly distinct there on the screen in terms of magnitudinal reach. So I would say at 128 flood, 42, on a really good night like it is right now, and I suspect we can see the Cygnus rift in the Milky Way, which means 5.5 seeing, that we can see stars down to magnitude 17 and perhaps more. That is a very exciting thing to discover. And the globular cluster looks quite good on the small screen of the Handycam. So with that, I'm going to say carpe noctem, and hopefully we'll be able to get out again together tomorrow night and have another look at this beauty under similar or even better circumstances. Carpe noctem.